What's up, YouTube? The Random Outdoorsman is back, and today I'm going to be showing you how I forged this tomahawk. This is the Random Outdoorsman. Okay, so before I get started, I want to just tell you what I'm going to do so you know. Obviously, I couldn't really talk while I'm beating on this thing with a hammer. It's kind of loud. You wouldn't even be able to hear me. So this is pretty much my first time forging anything. I used all pretty much tools that you can find around your own house. And I heated up the metal with pretty conventional ways. And so I'm going to be just voicing over the video. And I'll be telling you what I learned, what I used, what I did, and how I was able to come up with this tomahawk. And then at the end, I'll do a quick test with it, and then I'll tell you how the results of my further testing went. So, hope you enjoy this. Let's go. This was before I figured out how to get my forge hotter. I'll talk about that later. And I'm using a piece of old lawnmower blade for my metal. I did not accomplish much with my previous forge because it wasn't hot enough, so now I'm going to try something different. You see the metal is much hotter this time, and I'm brushing off some of the charcoal there. I use a different method, and I will discuss that later. But for now, I just want to say that what I'm doing here is basically just spreading out the metal to get a little bit thinner because I don't need it the full thickness that you see there. As I'm spreading this out, it's getting too wide, so I'm thinning it back down, which is also making the metal a little bit longer as well as thinner. This will be perfect for when I wrap it around that steel rod you see there and make the eye for the tomahawk. Once I got the metal hotter, it was much easier to forge, and it even stayed hotter longer. I was already starting to bend this metal, that's why it's already kind of bent. Once it gets hot enough, it bends very easily. But a quick synopsis of the tools I was using: some kind of strong pliers, some good welding gloves so you don't burn your hand. Some guys don't even wear gloves, but I wanted to. I'm using like a 3.5-pound small sledgehammer that was accomplishing what I needed to. You see that metal rod there that I'm bending it around? That is very important, because if not, you can't really get the metal to the size you want. I think you could also use a socket for like a socket wrench if you didn't have a metal rod. I don't know how well that would hold up though. But you see I almost got that bent, which is good. You see me flattening out this eye. That was actually kind of a mistake because I still needed to get the rod back in there, and I actually had to open up the eye to get it back in place. So don't do that. So this is my little forge here. It's some charcoal inside of a tin can with some holes punched in it, and a fan and a shop vac blowing on it to get it nice and hot. Using the shop vac helped immensely. It got the metal way hotter, way faster. So try to get something to blow a lot of air into your little fire if you can. I was just using normal charcoal. I got it condensed around the metal there, which helped. So you see I'm just spreading out this blade to give it that classic tomahawk head shape, and I'm actually pounding on an anvil. I borrowed this from someone I know, thanks Mr. Steve, and it does help if you have an anvil. You don't need one, you saw I was using the vise, but it does help if you can find one. When I was forging the eye with the lower temperature, I messed it up a little as you see there, but since I got it so hot, I was able to pound that back into place. I actually overcorrected it, had to pound it back, and then just started working on opening that up a little bit so I could fit the metal rod back in there, and then also just flattening out the top of the eye and the bottom so that it just looked a little bit nicer, a little bit flatter. It wouldn't have any problems when I was trying to fit it on the stick. Opened it back up there because I kept pounding it closed. Good thing about with forging, you can always heat the metal back up. So put that pin in there. It just happened to fit in that little square hole. If not, you can put it in the vise, but this did help. Metal's hotter than it looks, still hot enough to bend. You see I finally have that eye closed around there, and it's fitting looser now, which is great. So at this point, I'm trying to completely finish up that eye. You see how very hot that is. I'd already bent it a little bit in a clip that I excluded because it just wasn't necessary, but basically just left that rod in there and started to bend it over. Um, I will do that again. But you see I'm flattening out there on that horn just because I didn't want to hang it over the side. It wasn't really necessary. Um, Trying to pound that little tomahawk, little divot that's normally in the bottom of a tomahawk, and wasn't really working out. The metal wasn't hot enough right in that spot to compress the metal that much. But you see I got that very flat. It all of a sudden took a very uh, much more tomahawk head shape. And now I have it wrapped around there. I'm basically flattening out the metal just a little bit more. You see it's almost completely straight there, which is great. It's just flattening out that metal to get a little bit thinner, because I don't need it so thick. I was trying to get the blade flattened out the rest of the way here. Didn't quite get it done here, but almost did. So you see I'm basically flattening that out, just pounding on it. It's very hot this time. So I'm having some trouble with the pliers down there. It's because of the gloves. They make it kind of hard to hold the pliers, but it's worth it considering the fact that you could lose a finger on the very hot metal. So there I was trying to pound a little divot into the head, but it wasn't working because the metal wasn't quite hot enough. If you're wondering how I got the eye centered, I basically left the rod in there and just hung the eye over the edge of the anvil like I'm doing right here. You see, like that, and just pounded it center and then worked on it a little bit. So as the metal's getting cooler, it doesn't divot as much, it just kind of flattens out when you pound on it. That's what I'm doing, just taking out some of the large divots and flattening over the little mounds, I guess you'd call them. I am finally now going to be able to get the little divot in the bottom of my blade that I wanted. For me, I just wanted it there because it looks cool, and you see that on most tomahawk heads. And also it shows you which part's the bottom. So I'm finishing flattening out the edge because you want a nice taper going from the eye to the knife edge. Just as the metal gets colder there, it doesn't move as much metal, so it just smooths it out. I did not have as much material as I needed to forge weld it together. So basically, you see I didn't completely close the eye there. It's not welded back to the metal. That's okay. It will still work like that. This is my first real forging project. So I think I did okay. These metals getting cold in there, just kind of flattening it out. Because you have to do that to make it look good. Here's after all that work on the blade. You see it's still rough, so I want to just get that finished up, get the edge thinned out, and so we're on to that now. Now, this part is a little bit hard to explain. As you see that I'm trying to actually thin out the metal of the eye a little bit, even it up, because it didn't end up completely even. There were some sections that were thicker than others, and I thought that this would be the best way to do that. So basically just pounding there to try to get that evened out, make it look a little bit better, make it more balanced. Don't know how much I accomplished, but it looked a little bit better. You see I had the metal very hot this time, just pound out a little bit more, and I forget my water is there, so I have to move that so it won't spill. Then I take this lighter hammer here and I pound just about ½ inch in from the edge. What that does is just smooth it down so I know where to grind with the grinder, and it just gets out a couple of those last little unwanted divots there, right there on the edge of the blade, so I can sharpen it better. I was lucky to have good metal when I was working with this, so cooling it really didn't do much, but if you heat up metal very hot and you cool it, it basically crystallizes the metal and makes it very hard. To temper it, you need to sand it down, the part down that you want tempered, so you can see the colors that will go through there. Then you heat it up until it gets to around a yellow or a blue, somewhere in there, and then you cool it. That'll make it a good hardness for knives or throwing axes. I'm just getting a couple of those divots sanded out here. I actually had to wait till I sharpened it a little bit for that to be more effective, but still wanted to get a couple of them out. Basically here, I'm just sanding down the edge to get ready to hand sharpen and taking off a little bit of the scale to make it look cool. You want to try to get close to a knife edge. Don't go all the way because then it will make the metal very thin and then it will heat it up and basically temper it where you don't want it. Just get it as close as you can without it turning the metal colors. Now I'm just hand sharpening this to get out some of the bad scratches, get it down to a basic edge, Not going all the way down to an edge though, because this is such a rough stone. I'm not going to go over my full sharpening process. This is around 100 grit. I went up through 6,000 grit and then stropped it. If you want to know how I sharpen this, the way I did, I'll put a link in the description to a video on how I sharpen knives. For the handle here, I basically just took my axe head and my more robust knife. I traced inside the axe head, carved the handle down to that out of like kind of a sapling, and then just worked the head up there. So now I'm going to show you a little bit of the testing with this. So get ready for that. It slices, dices, chops, splits, and sticks. It's the new hand-forged tomahawk. Make yours today. Okay, so hope you liked that little video. So I tested this more off camera, and I just want to see how it worked out. It held an edge, it split, it did stick. I was throwing it a very small log. If I had been throwing it any kind of a tree, it would have been sticking all the time. And I split with it. It is just a tomahawk though. It's made to throw. It chopped well. I know you didn't really get to see much chopping in that. It was just supposed to be a funny little skit. So it did chop well. So you can make something like this and it work and function just like one you can buy. So I encourage you to do that. Try to make your own. Do what I did here. Try to make your own tomahawk. So that's all for today's video. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment. Tell us what you want to see next. Tell us what you thought about this video. Make sure to stay tuned for our next ones. Happy trails.